Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do a dual Wainwright reviews video. So the Wainwright Prize is a prize given to British nature and travel writing each year. And so today I wanted to talk about Wilding by Isabella and The Easternmost House by Juliet Blaxland. So I'm gonna start off talking about this book, which is published by Sandstone Press, and it is about Juliet Blaxland living in a house very close to a cliff, and she is talking about the fact that this cliff is falling apart through coastal erosion. So a lot of this book is sort of a chronicling of the time left living in this house and knowing that it will soon be gone in a couple of years or decades at most. So the book is divided into months throughout a year, and with each sort of chapter ending, she will say how much of the cliff has been lost over that month. In some months there's basically no change. Some months, especially during the summer, there's a lot of change. She explores the feeling of knowing that you're living in a world that is constantly changing and that is changing very rapidly in our contemporary world, especially in connection with environmentalism and how climate change is affecting the world as it is right now, and how fast we are seeing the effect of those changes. A lot of it is talking about rural life. So she talks about her childhood and growing up in a very rural lifestyle, being very in a direct connection with nature in all of her life, but in particular how much it meant for her as a child to be able to play freely, to be able to do things without parents putting a lot of restrictions on her exploration of nature. Obviously there's some things in relation to that she also mentions, in that she were allowed to do things that might not have been very safe. Things like local rituals or festivals and things like that, that I found very charming. There's something about that is really transporting, especially if you're someone who isn't familiar with this kind of life, that I'm not. There are sections in this book that she is very strongly criticizing things in the world in connection with in the environment, with our relationship with animals, with conservation and things like that. But a lot of her criticism is very sharpened against specific people or groups. So she will talk about how vegans say this and do this, but they don't do this. And there's a lot of pointing a finger at other people in this book that I really didn't like. The actual things that she's saying, I feel a lot of the time I found them to be interesting and also thoughtful. Things like how palm oil as a thing, as an industry, is a big problem, and that it isn't necessarily something that we are very aware of in a lot of parts of the world. I know that, for example, palm oil is a big thing in Italy, that they do very clear sort of marking for products that don't use palm oil, but it isn't a thing in Sweden. And so I appreciated a lot of her points, but the way she presents a lot of them, I found took away from my appreciation of the book. She is, as I said, pointing a finger at specific groups, so vegans or people who say they love animals, or animal lovers, pet owners, etc. She seems to be identifying with the group of farmers or people who live off the land, but also by pointing a finger at other people, she seems to be trying to guard against criticism towards herself and towards the people that she knows and that she cares for. But as I said, there is, I would almost say, a kind of spiteful tone to some of her arguments. I don't think that it is very helpful in getting progress. So yeah, I had a big reservation with this book. The other one I want to talk about is Wilding by Isabella Tree. So this is following Isabella and her husband, who are responsible for a large field of land called Knep. Their financial situation is based around this land. After several decades of this farming failing and producing less and less profit, they are getting desperate and trying to save it, so they decide that they want to rewild Knep. And in order to do this, it's kind of a big project, so they start trying to find funding for it, and it's a whole planning and discussion with a lot of experts and trying to figure out how to go about rewilding Knep. So this book is basically a chronicling of the progress of the rewilding. She also talks about the priors, so how they ended up deciding on the rewilding as a project. She talks about things like how this experience has brought her to conclusions about or insights about nature and how we view wildness. So that's something that is definitely a theme in this book, how what we think of as wild isn't necessarily the true definition of wild. Our perceptions on nature is so based on the kind of managing of nature that has been done for such a long time. Through this project that they have and the progression of that and seeing Knep come to life after this sort of almost like a coma in its sleeping and being downtrodden and everything, to becoming this super rich wildlife area and being so much more than they could ever imagine. She talks about general things to do with nature, and especially in contrast in relation to things like the controlling of nature, conservation, our experiences of being in nature, and how important it is to have that connection, especially as young people, and how it shapes the kind of value we give to nature in our adult lives. So I think this is a fantastic book. She's open-minded and she is criticizing both herself and others. So there's more of a general criticism in this in terms of things like systematic problems, which I think is more valuable to have. The one thing that I would say about this book, in contrast to both Juliet Blaxland's book, but just in general, it is quite heavy in terms of, she gives a lot of statistics in this book, a lot of facts, which makes it less easy to read, but not less important, not less valuable and interesting. Those are the two books that I want to talk about today. Let me know if you read any of these or if you're interested in reading any of them. But yeah, that was all I had today. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.